Welcome back. We're going to get right back to that conversation on consumer confidence in Canada with Nik Nanos joining us now. He's Chief Data Scientist and founder of Nanos Research. Nik, hopefully your signal lasts for the rest of this conversation. So we were just starting to talk about the findings of this. You say it's a glimmer of hope, but we're seeing a bit of a boost in consumer confidence. What do you think's behind that?
Well, the thing is it's been a pretty flat line, trend line for more than a year when it comes to consumer confidence. So 53 is positive because it's just been so flat for the last while. The one thing that we do know, first of all, as you mentioned in the opening, that the confidence among younger people has actually increased from about 51 points on the 100-point scale to 59. So it's an 8-point jump. It's the biggest jump, and it's what's been driving this positive mood. We also know that in the last week or so that the Liberal government has announced kind of a GST relief in order to help people with the rising cost of living. And we know that young people have been most likely to report that they're struggling to pay for the groceries and housing. So maybe this little glimmer of hope has to do with the Liberal announcement, because the reality is on all other fronts, it's thin gruel.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what's behind that, but I guess you just laid out what you think could be behind that glimmer of hope for young people, because as you say, they usually feel the pinch of affordability a little more than other demographics. Were you surprised, at least, to see those numbers?
Yeah, actually, I was. And, the thing is because young people have been the most pessimistic traditionally since the pandemic, because they've been feeling the stress of uncertainty when it comes to the economy. The other thing is that when we look at the changes over the last 4 weeks, the proportion of Canadians that believe the economy will get stronger has actually improved about 6 points, from about 19 to 25%, even though there's still a significant 4 out of every 10 think that the economy will weaken in the next 6 months. So it just looks like there's a combination of factors where people see relief in terms of GST and the cost of living. They see a proactive plan from the Liberal government. Whether anything will happen or not is a different story, but at least they're hearing that there's a very proactive plan from Mark Carney and the Liberal government in terms of building trade relations and trying to diversify the Canadian economy. I think you roll all those things up, and there's a little bit of, why don't we just call it short-term hope? Because at 53 out of 100, that's not bright. It just means that it's not as bad as it has been since November 2024.
And it is nice. I mean, as you say, it's not bright, but not as bad as it has been. It's nice, a bit refreshing to see some optimism among some Canadians. But as you mentioned, there's still some things to be cautious about, right? Like Canada reported the biggest job loss since August last month. I'm wondering how likely that is, do you think, to maybe affect consumer confidence going forward?
Oh, absolutely. And, the thing is that the job security numbers have actually been quite fragile over the last year or so. There's been a little bit of an uptick on that front in the last 4 weeks. But, the thing is that when we look at the overall environment, people are still worried. They're still anxious. There's still a lot of anxiety. We don't know what's going to happen in terms of our trade relationship with the United States. That's all we know is things have to change. But what Canadians have been hearing, at least, is a steady stream of announcements from the federal Liberals and Mark Carney to try to pivot the Canadian economy to reduce reliance on the United States. The reality is the U.S. will always continue to be our most important trading partner, but it's about diversification. So maybe this is a bit psychological. It might not be real, but people are just feeling a little bit better, especially if you happen to be under 30 years of age.
And it seems as though, as you say, some of the plans that the Prime Minister is putting forward are maybe changing people's opinions. He talks a lot about diversifying trade. Does that factor into any of the confidence that we're seeing here?
I think it does, especially from a messaging perspective. The thing is, people judge governments based on what they hear them talk about and what they focus on and what they hear in the news. And for Mark Carney, regardless of where you stand in terms of the perceptions of him as the Prime Minister, the fact of the matter is he's been very proactive. He's been traveling around the world, doing trade agreements, spending money on defense, building new partnerships. And I think there's a little bit of a dividend in terms of consumer confidence. And, we have to think of the flip side. Many times if people are feeling less confident from a consumer perspective, they stop spending money. And, at least we're in an environment now where it's a little bit more positive than we have seen in more than a year.
Yeah, absolutely. You say, that people are feeling positive right now because of talk and maybe, not seeing action just yet. I wonder how long people's patience will go, like in terms of maybe not seeing things turn around as quickly as people expect. If you've noticed any trends in the past in terms of that optimism being dashed.
It's interesting. Last year we did a survey and we asked Canadians, when did they want to see results from Mark Carney? And I think the majority said that they wanted to see results by the end of 2025. Well, TikTok, we're now in 2026. The big question is how much leeway will Canadians give Mark Carney? The other thing is that many Canadians believe that Donald Trump is outside of the control of the federal government. It's outside of the control of anyone. And that the reality is that we are on the receiving end of whatever the president in the White House wants to say and do in terms of Canada-U.S. relations. So there may be a sense that Mark Carney is probably doing everything that he could possibly do in terms of a situation where he doesn't really have a lot of control, but that they're giving him credit for the effort at this point in time. But the big question is, people can easily turn, especially if we see job numbers at risk, if we see a rising cost in terms of the cost of living, and it wouldn't take a lot for this little glimmer of hope to be thrown back into, what do we call it, the pit of despair. That was a movie. I think Princess Bride, Pit of Despair.
I actually don't know, but I will take your word on that one. And hopefully we don't go back into the pit of despair anytime soon. But I take your point that there's a lot up in the air right now, and we'll have to wait and see what happens. That's all the time we have. Nik Nanos, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for joining us.